Tom, that was your line.
Oh, all right. Well, I didn't know if we were still waiting or not. I guess we can just go ahead. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back from Thanksgiving break. I'm just still trying to wrap my head around everything, but we've not met obviously for 2 weeks. So we're glad that we've got a good group already this morning. We expect to have several more, but let's just go ahead and dive in. Welcome to our fourth session, which it's hard to believe that we've already been at this over a month. So we're just going to get rolling. So what we're going to do this morning to kind of get things started, and I don't necessarily have to have everybody go. I mean, it's really kind of up to you, depending on if you want to share. But we would love to hear from everybody about how we call them literacy connections. Basically, how are you doing? You should have been able to connect with one more person. So just kind of a couple of volunteers, maybe to just jump in and tell us maybe who you talked to and what you learned about that person and their organization.
I just want to share my graphic real quick, Tom, because I put a
Oh
bow
my God.
tie on them. I upgraded it.
Oh yeah, it's so much better than the last one.
Thank you. Thank you. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. So just jump in. Whoever wants to talk about if you talked with anybody last week or the week before, what that was like and what you've learned.
I I can jump in.
Thank
I
you,
met
Linda. Thank
with
you.
sure. I met with Erin Bradley from Front Porch Alliance and learned a lot about what she does and what her organization does. Um, and just we kind of compared notes a little bit on some of the challenges and goals that we have. So it was pretty good use of time.
Anything that surprised you about Front Porch Alliance that you didn't know, or anything that stands out?
I think just getting a broader sense of how many employees they have. I know that seems like an odd thing to say, but you see kind of from the outside what they are able to accomplish, but then kind of understanding from an internal standpoint, full time, part time, just the people involved to make the things happen.
And so how many employees do you remember how many was it because they have very few employees or they have,
Um, Getting a sense of, I guess, caseworkers versus coordinators and their full-time people versus part-time people. We were kind of talking about, the challenges of part-time, finding people, for specific things that we were hoping to accomplish. So.
all right, great. So if you just joined, we're doing kind of a quick warm-up. Share anything you learned from your literacy connection with talking to somebody else on the coalition over the last several weeks.
I can share.
Thank you.
I met with both Kimberly and Jillian from Literacy KC and got to be at their location in person for my time with Kimberly, which was really cool. I had been there before, but not really gotten the grand tour. So it was just really fun to see their space, and there were classes happening. So it was really fascinating to meet the people on the team there. And when Kimberly and I talked, we really kind of compared notes about stuff that the library does versus what Literacy KC does. And while I work with the younger set, I was able to connect her with some people here at the library who have been really wanting to connect with their work. And so hopefully, people in our outreach department doing similar work. So hopefully that will be a good connection. And then Jillian and I just got a chance to chat a little bit about our work, and I feel like I have a better sense of what's happening there, and it's a lot different from the work that I've been involved in, but similar also, I think, in many ways. So
Wonderful.
it's good.
I love it. I love that you went there physically and got to see their space. That's fantastic.
That's cool.
Real quick, I would love, April, would you share the little,
Yeah, I had it ready. We got a really lovely little message from Kimberly this morning. She wasn't able to join, so she was letting me know that she was sorry about that. But she said But she sent me a little note about kind of the takeaways from this exercise I'd love to share with everyone. So she said, I did get a chance to connect with Kate from the KC Public Library and thoroughly enjoyed having that opportunity. Please share my thank you with her. In addition, I want to give a huge shout out to Lauren and Kristen for the recent book donation to our organization for an upcoming event. The opportunity to conversate with Lauren opened up a conversation that led to this quick and easy partnership. So kudos to everybody. And also I just thought it was a beautiful example of, what we're trying to do, having these conversations that can catalyze all sorts of opportunities and new partnerships.
Fantastic. Love it. Anybody else? And we don't have to spend more time on this if you didn't, and it's okay if you didn't have a chance to connect with anybody. Yeah, Katie.
I can go. I talked to Jenny from Reach Out and Read. It was a wonderful conversation. We actually have quite a bit in common. And one of the things I loved learning about is how direct their connection is with the clinics that they work with, the doctors and nurses, and how they are giving out books, distributing books through that program. And that the books are wonderful for the kids that get them, but they're also a diagnostic tool for the physicians that are working with the kids, and that they can talk directly to the parents as that trusted resource, which I just thought was incredible. So I love what they're doing. I really appreciate their work and how it kind of supports what we're all doing, just in a really specific, clear, and thoughtful way. So anyway, it was really fun, very uplifting conversation for sure.
Love it. And Jenny's shaking her head. Yes, she's agreeing.
I am just floored that you brought all of it together, Katie. I love the presentation. That's fabulous. Katie has been in kind of the library world for quite a while in her current position as youth management at the Mid-Continent Library for several years now, 4 years now. And we just had a great time. It was a great conversation.
Good. That's awesome. Really happy to hear about these connections that are being made and people learning more about each other and their organizations, and loved hearing about the collaboration that was already mentioned. So anybody else? Okay.
I have a question maybe for folks. This is going to be sort of a central theme that we're going to keep coming back to, but how well do you feel like, since 4 weeks ago when we started, this version of the journey, to now, do you feel like you're making progress and kind of understanding the map of who everybody is and their different organizations and where they're falling in literacy across the lifespan? Do you all feel like you're making progress in that? We have some other tools and ways we're gonna, continue to deepen that knowledge, but it'd be helpful to get some feedback on sort of where you think you are. Do you feel like you're now experts and know everything about everybody and we can drop it and move on to something else? Or are you enjoying the learning journey and maybe you have certain questions you're curious about, anything like that?
They're stumped.
I'll jump in. I feel like we've got a good start, and I feel really comfortable reaching out to folks that I may have a question about. I know faces and names now in a way that I didn't before, which is really great. I don't feel that I know everything about all the organizations involved or would know how to partner yet, but I think I'm on my way to that, and that feels great. So it's keeping me coming back every week. I'm excited to see everybody on Mondays. So that's kind of how I'm feeling so far.
Thank you, Katie. Any other thoughts on
that? I've really appreciated the literacy connections. So having that extra tag on, so like it's an opportunity to connect with another organization and also an opportunity to like touch base on where we're at in this team building process with somebody else. So I like how that seems to be syncing up really well.
I love that. Thank you for the
Great.
One exercise we will have you do for homework. We'll go over this again, but just as a teaser, we've made a survey for you all to rank where your organization falls in literacy across the lifespan, and add just a couple bullet points or a couple notes about what programming you have in those different stages. And I think that will be, once we compile that information, that'll be just a really quick and easy resource that we can all just have. I know that's been I've heard from a couple of folks that they'd like to just have, some sort of quick reference guide, and that can also serve as sort of the next part of the conversation when we're thinking about what are the gaps in the coalition that we want to fill and that sort of thing. So that'll be a piece of homework for next time. But yeah, just wanted to let you guys know that's coming next.
All right. Well, is there anybody else that wants to share their literacy connection from the last 2 weeks? All right. Well, I'm going to throw it back to Adam for us to get kind of going with this week and announcements.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, what we'll do is we'll jump into, let's see, I think we're going to frame the agenda with our POM process. So let's do that. But before, I want to say something about, just where we're heading and making sure that you all feel comfortable participating, and if there's anything we can do to help. So if, we're still just getting started, we're still off to the races, and we're still orienting is how I see it, getting to know each other we're early in that process still. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Okay, so if there's anything we can do to aid in the process, making sure, like if you want us to even help match people and organize that, if that would be helpful, let us know. We just wanted it to be, more natural, however it unfolded. So the agenda we had in mind are warm-ups, and then we're in this phase here, and then we'll talk about the rest here and confirm that that's the right track. But first, our agenda is that it's a draft. So we design it in mind thinking it'll help us get to the outcomes. But to confirm with you all, our focus today is the continuing of coalescing, creating a shared thought bubble is the language I learned from a mentor of mine to describe this process. And this is part 2 of that, a continuation of that. When we talked about it last time, we said these are the reasons it matters. I mean, if we individually see the problem only from our subjective view, then, and you can kind of imagine all the things, then, we'll have a limited view. We won't get the best resources or the best of everybody. We will miss opportunities like some of the ones you described earlier, So, and I'll ask you if you have any more reasons. I'll finish this here. Any more reasons for why it matters. Collectively seeing the problem with unity will allow us to, and fill in the blanks there. It'll allow us to accomplish, get things done, feel more aligned, feel more engaged. Okay. And so another purpose or why it matters that we create a shared thought bubble is so that we all have buy-in. Yeah, so is there any other thoughts on that, on shared thought bubbles, why they matter? I have to stop the share just to see if anybody raises a hand or anything. Are we tracking? That's really what I'm wanting to make sure. This is all about us having a shared thought bubble for how we're going to use our time today. So anybody not aligned with that focus of continuing the shared thought bubble or does it raise any questions or concerns for anybody? Lovely. All right. Switching back into the slides. So from there, from our little purpose is discerned. What is our focus? Why does it matter? And from there we say, okay, well then what outcomes would reflect that purpose? And when Tom and I were talking recently, that's what we think of as vision. When you look at all the outcomes that you want and you take them all together, they all add up together. The way sentences create a book, all of your outcomes come together and create a vision. Tom, do you like that? So it is that way. It's really looking at what are the granular things or the big picture things, the quantitative things and the qualitative things that all would express the purpose. And we would organize it into our outcomes. So what outcomes would reflect that purpose so that we know we're on track? Very important alignment there. So having shared language is what it would look like. And we're going to be focusing on that a lot today, actually. Stating the problem in a way that's clear and we all agree on it. The problem, what problem? The problem we're all joining together to address. So we should be clear, like, what is that problem? Yeah, am I working on the same problem you're working on? Oh, it seems similar, but when we get into it more, we were working on different problems, right? Okay. No, how do we know better what each other does? Very important. And we're actually making progress on these outcomes. Are there any other outcomes? I will stop my share, see if there's any other outcomes you'd like to get from today's session. Beautiful. Then, really, then the idea is, does this agenda help lead to these outcomes? And I'll show it on a bigger page if that helps. Does this agenda lead to the outcomes of increasing shared language, stating the problem in a way we all see is clear, and getting to know each other better? So where we're going is we're going to do consensus on key terms. We're going to try to isolate the 3 most important questions. That'll take some time. We're going to do that as a group. April will lead us through that. We'll take a little break. We'll come back. We're going to do some breakouts. We're going to spend a good chunk of time with that, where each group will then work on one of those 3 questions. And then we'll come back together, debrief, make some meaning out of it, and wrap up and move into the next sessions or next stage. So, yeah, any comments or questions on that? Does that work? Any suggestions for any other topics? All right. So with that, I'll hand it over to you. Oh, no, it's to me still. I'm still setting this up because what I wanted to say, I wanted to share with you some thoughts from the last meeting and what I heard. And it's been a couple weeks, you know, we haven't met for a couple weeks. And so I was taking I watched the video again. And one of the things that really rang true is that we're still getting to know each other and we want to know each other. We also want to get going. We want to create a plan. We want to tackle this problem. So come on, let's do it already, which I totally get. And so let's see. I want to also tell you that nobody's late to the party. If it's feeling that way and we're still coming together and you're still like, hey, what's going on here? We're still doing that. So I wanted to make that note for people. But here, what I heard is we need to keep coalescing. We need to learn about each other. Why did we get into this? You know, what does each other do well? We need to level set. We need to resolve any differences in understandings, maybe in differences in perceptions or values. That's really important to the coalescing process. We want to find a way to address those disparities. They're natural. They're there. It's a natural process of groups or just of people together. They're all divergent. We're all different people. We all have different experiences and are come from different trajectories based on a host of factors, you know, incidents of birth, experiences we've had along the way, choices we've made along the way, you know, and goals that we've decided upon and things that matter to us. So out of that diversity and divergence, how can we then converge together, use those that variety of experiences and knowledge and insights to collectively address this problem? So that's what I heard from last time. Any thoughts or reactions to that? Does that reflect accurately the mood of the group from last time and going into this time? Good. Also the importance too, and this was a theme Katina brought up, she didn't use these words, but it was like the complementarity of excellence is what does each do well? And equally honest, what does each of us not do so well? That maybe we could, you know, support each other where we're strongest, you know, support each other. Let's see, support each other where you're weakest from where I'm strongest and where I'm weakest from where you're strongest. That's what I mean. We the complementarity of our excellences. Each of us have developed excellences in regards to this topic. All right. So bringing it back to this discussion, this image came to mind of you know, different people wearing blindfolds checking out this elephant, and you know, it's seeing different perspectives, versus this image of people all closing their eyes almost and seeing the same thing in common. Having a shared thought bubble is the language for it. So, you know, how important is it, you know, I'll just put these questions out there to you, and I'd like some reactions. I would really very much like to hear your thoughts on this. That how important is developing that shared language to the process of coalescing and growing together? And then what comes first, you know, the planning or the coalescing? And, you know, what are your thoughts on that? So yeah, opening it up. Which image, Linda? The left,
The shared image with the books and the city, and it was very cool.
I'm going to put, thank you so much, because I worked so hard on this. I mean, I spent so many calories typing in a description to an image generator. No, it does. No, that is what I did, but it takes a long time to kind of, you know, correct it and stuff. I'm just playing with these AI tools and having a blast. But yeah, I thank you for that, because it really it's a custom image of what we're doing here. So yeah, all right, cool. So reactions to those questions, language, and yeah, coalescing and planning. I see thought bubbles over Jillian's head. I see one over Katina's head right now.
Well, I'll say that if we don't have common language, shared language that we agree on, and even shared beliefs of where we've been, where we are, where we're going, the people, about the people that we serve, the families, the adults, all of that, then I don't think you get to the work. I recently did a presentation, and that was it. And I invited everyone, like, you know, are these things that we can agree on? Are these the things that we can share belief on? Is this the common language? And if we can't, then, you know, and this may sound mean, but it wasn't. But it was like, I invited them to like not be in the room because they weren't ready. If they didn't agree to some of those things or what have you, then if they chose to stay, that meant they were willing to go on the journey with us and evolve as we did the work together. But I think there's like a realization you have to get to a point of realizing, like, sometimes you're just not ready. We all get to different places at different times. And if it's not going to support the work and move it forward, then sometimes we have to remove ourselves out of the environment. And you know, that takes a lot of courage, I think, but it also is honest to the process. And for me, when I think about systemic change, I think it's necessary work.
Good, thanks. Other thoughts or reactions to the importance of language, shared thought bubbles, shared beliefs too? Yeah.
Yeah, I would just chime in and say, like, building on what Katina was just saying, like shared, not just shared language, but shared values. Because I feel like we're all coming from our own separate organizations, and we're all leaders within those organizations. And it's like, there's a concept called infinite leadership that I think about a lot, that is elevating the purpose rather than like elevating the overall purpose, not just your specific purpose with your organization or your whatever individual cause might be, you know. And so I think that keeping that in mind is that we're all here for something bigger than the parts.
Thank you. Wonderful. Other reactions to that? Very good. Love to hear from a few more. In fact, I'm hoping for it, Jenny.
What really kind of, well, that's interesting. What really kind of stuck out to me was the kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. And I don't know that we can really do the planning without having the common ground, knowing where we're going. So that's my 2 cents.
No, it's wonderful. Thank you. Good, good. Yeah, put that image back up too, please.
Yeah, I was just going to share this. This is from Peter Senge wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline in the early 90s, and he talked about the importance of shared vision or shared values, shared thought bubbles. But he talked about a hologram, which this is an image of a hologram. But if you divide a hologram into parts, you'll see that the hologram is made up of little tiny images of the bigger image. And so it's just the power of each of us has our own, we come to this with our own images, our own ideas, our own way of seeing the world, but collectively we're forming a common language, a common vision for this partnership, for the coalition. So that's a lot of why I think the importance of really spending this time. Senge just said, there's nothing more palpable in human affairs than a shared vision or this shared thought bubble, and it's really answering the question, what do we want to create? So just some more food for thought around this whole idea of a shared thought bubble or a shared vision for us.
Perfect. Very nice. Yes, other insights, please.
And I really thought what Katina was saying about, if as we talk about the 3 questions and the responses, maybe we aren't all going to agree. I mean, one of the questions is going to be, what's your definition of literacy? I mean, that's a big question. And I would just assume that everybody in this group would have the same answer to that question, but maybe not. And so that's part of what we're going to kind of really dig into. And so it's going to be important that just some very simple, basic things like, what is literacy? What does it look like across the lifespan? Ensuring that we're all basically on the same page.
Nice. And I would like to echo Jillian's comments too about each of us coming from our own institution. I've been doing a lot of work on values recently. It's really relevant to a client of mine, and when I started in consulting, values were talked about all the time, and it's making me realize that values haven't been talked. It's gone out of style, basically. We don't talk about it as much, but they're there, and that's what values are. They're invisible, but they're there. And when you talk about values, you realize they're there. When you don't talk about values, then they're still there and they're affecting you, but you don't have any say in them anymore. They're just like in the background of obviousness, which is another that from the same mentor, Marcia Schenk. She had this idea of shared thought bubbles and this other concept of the background of obviousness. There's just things that are so obvious to each of us that I don't even think to say it. It's just in the background and it's operating me. And this is another key part of values. There's a couple of key points in my dive into values. One is that values are what guide our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. You've heard me talk about the TFBs. I'm drawing a triangle with my finger because that's the shape that I have of a TFB, and there's many of them, and we radiate our TFBs out of us. And so what shapes those TFBs? I think values. And where do values come from? They come from our institutions. There's probably more answers to that, but I'm doing what I call my idea fashion show. I'm running some ideas down the runway, and you decide if they look good or not. It's up to you. You can accept, reject, or adapt what I say. And I'm trying to remind, because sometimes I sound like, you agree with me, but you don't. I just want to make clear. But that institutions are really value sets. There's a lot of things that make an institution, but one of the things you can point to is, well, that institution has those values, and that institution has these values, and maybe there's overlap, but maybe and that's what an institution is. And when you join an institution, and then this is really cool because I didn't plan on bringing this up, but I read an article this morning from one of the real early thinkers on organizational dynamics. He passed away this year in 2003. That's why the article was out. And one of his great insights was just about the degree to which our institutions we're in transmit those values to us individually. And then now here we are from our institutions with our values. Many institutions are workplaces, schools, communities, families, governments, informal groups, faith communities. I mean, all of the activities we do pretty much happen within the context of an institution. All right, I'm kind of drifting and saying a little too many things, but bringing it back to the importance of values, and then then putting it out on the table, and let's have a values party, like and then let's agree on a set of values that then help us move forward together, because that's what will make us an institution eventually, is the values. All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Turn the Page KC, we're one of the privileges of being in a really small organization is that we can all come together as a group pretty easily. And this year, kudos to Kristen, who's in Greece right now. She decided that it would be valuable for us to sit down together and use our in-person meeting time to create value statements for Turn the Page KC. And I feel like we have learned a lot about each other as professionals. And also just like I think it just like having the discussion, it has been valuable for us. And I think that we're getting to like a better place of like, when people ask us like, who are you and what do you do? Like having those value statements in place is a lot sometimes easier to point to than a mission statement.
I also think that if you go through an exercise like that and everybody agrees on what your set of values are, then that allows for disagreements to happen in a productive way. Like I always use my marriage as an example. Like my husband and I, we have our disagreements, but we can always come back to our shared set of values to get through it and get over it, and I think that works with any group of people.
Wonderful.
I recently worked with some parents and did a values auction where they had a set amount of money. They didn't know how many values would be presented or what those values would be ahead of time. But once they had exhausted their money, that was it. And I'm also doing that with a group where the individuals will work as teams to do that. And one of the things that I'm finding is that oftentimes, like, we have these things that we say we value, but there is a priority to them. Or like one is going to outweigh the other. And it's like, if I had, infinite amount of money, like this is it. This is the thing that is going to drive me before anything else. And I think sometimes we forget. Or we don't, I think kind of what Adam said in terms of like, we're not thinking about those things. We know they impact our lives and all of that, but being intentional about identifying them and the priority of the value that you place upon them is extremely important when apparently this is a season of coming together for collective impact. Because in every space that I'm in, that's what I'm working on. And so this whole thing around being guided by your values, identifying what they are, I think is going to be tremendously important because, in fact, we have gotten away from them. And we need that to like resurface to guide our work.
This is such a cool, like, outgrowth, unexpected. We didn't put values into our work with you, but I think it should be. Or do you think it should be? Would you like us to then maybe gather, we can do the work for you. We can do be the Sherpas, so to speak, and like gather, input from each of you about values and then present back and then have you all talk about it as a group. We can make it easier. That's what facilitate means, and we really embrace it. Facilitate means to make easy. And really, Tom, April, and I, that's really what we want to make this process easy for you. So yeah, a values journey. All right, this is great. I'm 2 minutes over my time budget, so thank you. I will yield this over to April. Let's see, Lauren's comment real quick.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect, lovely.
No, I think this is actually a perfect segue into the next section, which is really, you know, this kind of more theoretical of like why it's important to have a shared thought bubble for strategic planning and coming together as a coalition. Now we're kind of getting to, okay, what does this really mean for us as a coalition? What does this mean for the topic of literacy? And so I want you to keep in mind this values conversation too, because I think that will be really relevant to this conversation as we're thinking through what do we need to be aligned on essentially before we can move into, you know, this building the plan, which is essentially, I mean, just as a little teaser trailer, we're going to take you through the motions of like purpose, outcome, and methods for the coalition. And so for you to be able to create a purposeful purpose statement that, you know, you have clarity around the words that you're using and creating that shared vision, like what do you need to do before we get to that stage? What do we need to be aligning on? So that's really the question that we're going into this conversation with. Adam, can you share the screen? So, the exercise right now, we're just going to have a conversation around key concepts that are central to our work together. And this is, you know, totally a draft. This is something that we put together based on our interviews with you, our surveys with you, kind of some conversations we've been having of what we're calling like the 3 big questions or the 3 big concepts that, like, you know, we as consultants have heard that you feel like you may need alignment around. So I'd like to talk through those with you. I'd like to get your feedback on whether you think these are actually the right questions. And then also I'd like to continue populating it. Like what else? What else do you feel like you need to have alignment on in terms of concepts, in terms of values, in terms of priorities, to be able to move forward as a group into the strategic planning process? So, if that sounds good, we can get started. So the first one, and as Tom mentioned before, yeah, the first one is truly just what is literacy? And it seems like a very simple question, but you know, some of the sub questions or areas that we could explore together are, you know, in terms of actually breaking that down. If literacy is an activity, you know, what are the skills and knowledge that are kind of subcomponents of that? What do you actually try to teach when you're teaching literacy? How do we teach literacy correctly in our schools and our communities? So, you know, what does that really mean? What does that really look like in a curriculum and, you know, in terms of learning outcomes? Another sub question is, what literacy levels are we targeting? So are we just aiming for basic literacy? So, and you guys are going to know these terms better than I did, but, you know, from what I understand, just, you know, kind of the bare bones of being able to read and understand what's on the text, to, you know, functional literacy a bit higher, to even really high proficiencies in literacy. So as a coalition, what are we prioritizing? You know, where's the finish line, you know, of what we're trying to do? How should literacy be measured? You know, we've talked a lot in the interviews, especially about, you know, different ways that literacy is currently being measured across the lifespan. And I've heard a lot of, you know, critique of, you know, the ways that literacy is measured. So how should it be measured? How do we, you know, create a better way of measuring it, or you know, what's the starting point for that? And then what distinction do we want to draw between literacy and other foundational life skills? That's something we've definitely heard from you guys about, you know, the primacy of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the fact that literacy is often perceived to be either competing with other basic, you know, services for human survival in the community. Also how literacy is, you know, fundamentally integral to, you know, human development in all sorts of ways. And so, you know, maybe competition between literacy and other skills isn't the right framing. Maybe, you know, a holistic view of integrating literacy into a larger plan for human development is a better way to go about it. So what is our distinction, and how do we talk about that as a coalition? I'm going to just keep going and then you guys will have a chance to talk. But so that's what is literacy? Those are some questions that we could delve into for what is literacy, creating a definition for that. And then what is literacy across the lifespan? So what is the role of literacy in different stages? So, you know, what is an adult trying to get out of literacy rather than, you know, a pre-K student, for example? How do we measure, again, literacy at different stages of the lifespan? What are the right indicators for that? And are some stages, for the purpose of this coalition, are some stages of teaching literacy more important than others? Again, just a question, you know, in terms of prioritizing as a coalition what we're doing. And then the last question, what does it mean to make Kansas City a city of readers? So really making it local, making it, you know, focused for the task at hand here. What does this actually look like? What does it look like exactly? How do we measure it as a community? Literacy for who in Kansas City? So what are the specific demographic groups that we're targeting? Or that we want to make sure we don't, you know, we don't have a blind spot for. How can we do this in an inclusive and equitable way? This also includes those that have diverse linguistic and cultural needs, like the immigrant populations, for example, in Kansas City. And then finally, you know, who else needs to be involved? So what are the community-wide stakeholders that we need to support Kansas City as a city of readers? What other types of behaviors and structures does the city need? So when we're thinking about, you know, a city of readers, what does that actually look like? Again, who and what, you know, needs to exist in Kansas City to kind of support that, that reality? So yeah, I'll stop there. That's a lot. But I'd love to just get your reactions on this list to begin with. And then, yeah, we're going to probe into, like, is this list complete? How would you, you know, suggest to edit it? What additions or what subtractions? Do you think some of these things are just not that important right now for where we are in the coalition? Because again, I just want to, you know, ground us in, these are the most top priority things that we need to get done before we can go into strategic planning. So this isn't necessarily an exercise of just populate all the questions you can possibly think of, but like, what are the areas that we really need to agree on before we can move forward as a coalition? Okay, done talking. I'd love to hear any thoughts.
My initial thought is overwhelming. That was a lot of information, a lot of different pieces. So breaking it up would be easier for me to digest and respond to.
Okay.
That being said, literacy, you know, we're the birth to 5 years group. So literacy starts at birth. And I think the way to kind of measure that is, you know, how much the way that we look at it, I guess I should share, and maybe it's not the right way, but as a starting point, is how much our parents read to their children. Is that once a week? Is that 3 times a week? Is that, you know, what does that look like? What do they want to know at different stages? Do they know how to share a book? What we say is share a book with family, not read a book with the family, because they might not be able to read the book, but they can definitely share the book. They can look at pictures and things like that. So, I mean, as far as the littles, that's what I would share.
Yeah, that's great. Adam, could you go ahead and share the screen? I think maybe it's just easier for us to brainstorm with that.
I will, but I want to just share real quick. I'll just put a link. Just this week, 2023 has been a year of interesting scientific discoveries. There is an ocean on this planet we didn't know existed that is bigger than all the other oceans combined. That was discovered in this year, and you can look it up. And I know it sounds crazy me saying it, so I'll stop there. But another discovery, this article says that babies learn language before they're born. So we need to have them represent. No, just kidding. But like, okay, yeah. So and then you said share the screen. So yeah, I'll do that. I just wanted to share that little injection of like, this is recent stuff. We're making discoveries about literacy. All right. Yes, back to you, April.
Yeah, no, I felt like I love that comment from Jenny. I think that's so when we're thinking about literacy across the lifespan, kind of the role of parents, you know, I think the role of parents in engaging the community is something that we've heard a lot from you guys about. And I think, you know, particularly when we're talking about Kansas City as a city of readers who needs to be involved, prioritizing parents and families sounds like something that I've heard from you all at least.
So basically, I mean, I think what we're wondering, correct me if I'm wrong, April, are these the 3 questions that we should focus on now? Or can you think of others that we just completely missed? Like, oh no, this is a big question and we should, we're open to the nominations because because I think, you know, unless you all have other suggestions, we're thinking about, you know, having you all break up into 3 groups to actually tackle some of these once we come back from, you know, break after a little bit more conversation.
And the
Another
questions are
question.
just, oh yeah, please go ahead.
I think there's another question too. And that may be, what is as a collective, what is our baseline knowledge about literacy? For example, like Adam was like, hey, this is a new discovery. And I'm like, no, it's not new information. We've known this and for decades. But people often spend resources to do research and then tell us stuff that we've already known when we've been steeped in that work. And then so for people that may not have been steeped in that work, it does seem new and, you know, fresh and all of that. And we're like, no, we've been screaming this stuff from the mountaintops for years. And so I think as a collective, as we go into this work, we have to be honest about what our baseline knowledge is or where we are on the continuum of being literacy experts so that we do the work well. And so I think that's another major question, because if we're not also evolving in our own knowledge, then do we serve our students, our families, our partners well? If we just don't have the knowledge to do so.
Yeah.
I so
When we're talking about, oh yeah, go ahead.
I so agree with Katrina. Tina, I think that everyone's coming with experiences, and that goes back to our values. And I think our knowledge is probably on a different level, having been based on our experiences, and how to come to that same level of understanding of what literacy is and where it is in the world that we live in. And I also feel like I would hope that we could be experts in that to share with our educational systems as well, so that we could, like the schools and teachers within that could look at us and say, oh, we could look at this group as a resource in literacy because they have done the background, they know what is going on in literacy. So I would love for us to be able to be that resource.
So I added this question here. This is how I phrased it. Just tell me if it's not right. But what is the baseline knowledge of literacy that we as experts currently have and that we need to have? So does that reflect? Tina, good. All right. And then what Lauren, I think, entered chat. Tell me if this is right. What are the biggest barriers to literacy?
Yeah, or what are the biggest barriers that we see specific to our community that we're working in?
Oh, and then
Specific to Kansas City.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what is our community? Yeah, what does it mean to make Kansas City? Who is Kansas? Okay, so specific community. Okay, good. All right, April, back to you.
Yeah, can we just leave the questions up there? I think it's easier for people to think when they're looking at it. It's definitely easier for me to think that way. So yeah, I would love to hear more reflections on these questions. I mean, do you when you're looking at them, what are some of the sub questions that you have? What are you most curious about? Where do you expect that there might be different approaches? I'd just love to kind of unpack this a little bit more as a group before we go into breakouts. What's controversial?
What the question I would have or would like to ponder is, what have we done? Which could, I'll possibly say everything. But what have we done that hasn't worked, right? That we may need to abandon in order to actually get to the goal or the finish line. And that's hard sometimes because people love their programs or they love the things that, you know, they've created. It's like their baby, they gave birth to something. And sometimes it's hard to let go, even if in fact we have the information that says, yeah, but that doesn't work. So I think that may be something that's controversial. I don't know, but it certainly needs to, I think, have a discussion, right?
I wrote it in a weird way. I don't know what you think of it, but what have we done that doesn't work that could be reconsidered so that the resources could be recaptured and reallocated? But that might be, you know, I don't want to alter the question.
And what we have, where you have that the bullet point under what does it mean to make Kansas City a city of readers? So that last bullet point, what new community-wide behaviors or structures and systems? So structure/systems. Because if we don't have conversations around systems, then and I believe that you talked about like diverse linguistic and cultural needs. So equity, I think, is part of the conversation also.
Where are you? I'm sorry.
The second to last bullet point under what does it mean to make Kansas City a city of readers?
We do have equity in the previous bullet point, inclusivity and equity.
Okay. Oh, yep. Sorry, I didn't see that.
That's okay.
I don't have my glasses on today.
No worries. Yeah, the screen, the text is a little small. I wanted to give Lauren a chance to give voice to her comment about multiple literacies. I think that's really interesting. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
So I just came back from the National Association for Educating Young Children conference in Nashville last week. And something that one of my co-presenters brought up was recognizing multiple literacies. And how, you know, in assuming that, you know, yeah, we're all here to talk about, you know, reading literacy and traditional literacy, and we know that that's important, but how can we honor and value non-traditional literacies, and how can they inform the work that we do with our community members? I just didn't want, I want us to make sure that we're not leaving out you know, oral storytelling and different traditions, different literacy traditions that aren't based in, you know, book reading.
Yeah, I really think for me that also gets to, it's an important piece of literacy across the lifespan, but also just how are we defining literacy? You know, what are the skills and knowledge, and what are the skill levels that we're targeting? And so, you know, and how does that relate to, you know, other forms of literacy, other forms of, you know, basic life skills? How are those things integrated? So I think that's, you know, it's a very real question. It's, you know, it's hard to tell sometimes it's hard to tell where literacy stops and, you know, other things, other things start. And, you know, is it useful to make that distinction? Is it better to think more of like a spectrum of, you know, skills? Okay. Well, any last thoughts on this list? I know we're at break time, so I want to give room for another comment or two, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back.
I think the one question that's I really keep going back to is, I don't know, is what are some of the stages? Are some of the stages in the lifespan more important than others? That's tricky because
Mhm.
it's a lifespan, right? I mean, people are where they are at different places. So I don't know that we could target that. That's just something that I don't know what's wrong with it, but there's something that it hits me as wrong.
I've been thinking about that too, Jenny. In that, you know, if we, you know, if we're talking about early literacy, we also, you know, we need to have adults that have some literacy baseline where they feel. That's one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing, is that, you know, caring adults are, you know, invested in their kids being able to read proficiently, but aren't comfortable on their own literacy skills. And so it's kind of like a back and forth. And it's just like, that's where it's a really cyclical thing, just like poverty is cyclical. So yeah.
So I captured it this way: which stages of the lifespan may warrant particular focus or attention? Is that sound all right, Jenny?
Well, it was the third question that you already had on there is what I was kind of commenting on, but yeah, it is just, you know, I don't know if there's a particular stage. I guess that was my thought.
Yeah. Okay. So I how do you want me to represent that?
I guess more question marks there. I don't know. I mean, I think it just needs to be a discussion.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, this was truly just, you know, a draft. And also, you know, I think we were trying to be a little controversial in some of these, right? Like, we want you all to be thinking about the hard questions. And if, you know, if through that process you decide that some of these questions aren't relevant, or you make a conscious choice to prioritize all the stages or whatever else, then that's progress. So.
And then real quick before break, Lauren, is this, I didn't know how to capture your question. So can you help me?
Regarding multiple literacies?
No, that one we have, I think you were,
okay.
Yeah, you said something about a necessary baseline. I can't remember.
No, I kind of feel like that fits into, you know, what
Yeah.
levels of literacy and, you know, yeah, what literacy levels are we targeting being basic or functional?
Okay.
No, I was just kind of like bouncing off of Jenny on that point in terms of like, and maybe that's just me trying to answer that question about what stages are more important, but yeah.
Good. Gotcha. All right. And then do we have a decision? Are we going to go with these 3 questions, or are we going to approach some of these ones that emerged from our conversation?
Yeah, so since we've come up with more than 3 questions now, I guess those other potential questions could also be considered core questions. Essentially, we're going to have 3 groups, and so we need to pick, for the purposes of today, what are the 3 major questions that we're going to be focusing on. So you know, I think some of the questions under other potential questions are getting to, so what are the biggest barriers to literacy in our community? You know, that could be maybe something that's integrated under what does it mean to make KC a city of readers, or it could be a standalone question. And then, yeah, what is the baseline knowledge that we, you know, of established fact that, you know, that we want to call established fact as a coalition, that we all want to, you know, expect as, you know, level of fluency in this topic, or, you know, being, what do we want to set as the standard for that? And then what have we done that doesn't work? I think honestly that can almost be just a question to itself.
Yeah, but I will put it, I think it does fit under this topic here, because it's what it, you know, Kansas City related. And so we can, in order for us to talk about, you know, what does it mean? We could talk about, well, what did we think it meant? And we tried it, but it didn't work, you know? So if that works for everybody, I think we have really, that really enhanced things. So I'm really, really grateful to that discussion. And if everybody feels satisfied that these are 3 groups, then April, do you have a plan for how to do?
Yeah, I'll give instructions when we come back. I just want to ask, are we okay with how we integrated those questions? Do you guys agree that those are kind of the 3 major buckets? All right, we'll give you 5 minutes and we'll come back and give instructions for the breakout. Instructions, you can get everybody oriented. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to be splitting you guys up into 3 groups, and each of you will be working on a different one of the core questions that we talked about. And so you'll have 20 minutes together as a group, and then we'll come back and share reflections. The main questions I'd like you to be focusing on for this time is, looking at those, the main questions. So literacy across the lifespan, and KC as a city of readers. I'd like you not to necessarily answer all of the sub-questions. That's, beyond today's exercise, but looking at those questions, considering them, what would you all propose as a working definition for each of those key terms? Literacy across the lifespan, and KC as a city of readers. And then, in the process of that, write down any questions that you have for the coalition, to bring to the group that you feel like you need further clarification, you need further research, or maybe even further just discussion with the coalition to have clarity on that definition. Does that make sense?
So should we ask each group to designate like a recorder, somebody to write down the answers?
Yeah, so if someone in the group could volunteer to be the note taker, that pretty much will go for every time that we have breakout groups. So if we can just get that into our muscle memory as soon as we break into breakout groups, if someone could be that wonderful human that volunteers to take notes for the group, that would be lovely. Okay, is the assignment clear? So you're focusing not on answering the questions necessarily, but creating a working definition for literacy across the lifespan, or KC as a city of readers. And you're only going to work on one of those definitions as a group. So group 1, you'll be sent in a minute, and you'll be focusing on what is literacy. And the easiest way for you guys to pull up and look at those sub-questions, because we won't be able to share the screen with you, is actually to go to Basecamp and to pull it up. So Adam actually shared it in Basecamp under docs and files. So,
what if I just put them in here and they could just copy and paste them? That'd be easier.
The whole slide?
No, I'm just grabbing the questions. Like, I don't know if I'm just putting the questions from the slide into the chat so they could just grab it, or right? Wouldn't they?
Yeah, whatever you all feel like you'd like to do, but you can find the whole slide deck on Basecamp. But essentially, group 1 will be what is literacy, group 2 will be what is literacy across the lifespan, and group 3 will be KC as a city of readers. Sound good? All right, I'm gonna open the rooms, and we will see you guys back at 12 o'clock.
We're each joining a room. Is that the plan?
Yeah, let me move Katina up. It looks like she got it. Yeah, I think that'd be great if we could go in and help facilitate.
Yeah, real quick, how we doing so far?
So for everybody joining the Zoom room, I'm dropping a Google Doc in here. If you are able to quickly copy paste your notes into that, that'd be lovely. And we can also kind of work on this document together as we're debriefing. Let's see, I think everybody's back. Great. All right. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed being a fly on the wall in my conversation. I think let's just go ahead and kick it off and let's get started. We'd love to hear from group 1. If you could let us know how your conversation went, what were the important or interesting kind of cruxes of the discussion, takeaways, and then getting into your working definition. Any questions for the group?
Okay, I think we were in group one, what is literacy? And so the definition part actually came relatively quickly, but it was when we kind of dove back into, the measurements and being functional and the competency levels and what does that look like and how are we supposed to be the ones to measure that, and what's an acceptable, literacy level. But at the end of the day, our definition is the ability to write, read, listen, and speak so a person can communicate within the world they live in.
So when you say the world they live in, because we talked a little bit about developmentally disabled or the deaf community, so that would kind of apply to like a deaf person, if they could communicate, if they could read Braille, I guess, then I guess that's a blind person, sorry. Anyway, that's, I guess, my question, clarifying that.
Yeah, we talked pretty extensively about their world and what does that mean, and who are we to judge what that means, like functionality.
Did you have any other, you mentioned kind of getting into the sub questions, like what were some of the things you struggled with? Maybe were there questions that you singled out for further discussion with the group or further research?
A lot of, and guys, please feel free to jump in. A lot of what we kind of struggled with was, the measurement. How do we determine what functional is for where they are, and does that mean where they are is functional, and if they can work in the world that they are in, that's functional, and then a lower level or a higher level or whatever is going outside of that comfort level and navigating how successful they are, that's where we got tripped up a lot.
Okay. Anybody else from the group want to add anything?
I think there was a lot of richness in the conversation. One of the things questions is, how would you react if someone told you you weren't literate enough?
We also talked a little bit about the preventative versus the, the other side of it. Someone that, has been struggling with reading for a longer period of time, and what we should do to help with that area as well, and that it needs to be worked on at the same time.
So people that are already maybe, by whatever measurement standard we're using, kind of behind the curve, helping them, and then also working kind of upstream to prevent issues from forming. Okay, that's interesting. So upstream versus downstream, so I'm going to call that. Well, I think it's interesting that you.
Oh yeah. We also talked about levels of literacy, or things like that, models of literacy. How do we gauge, what is literate enough, and all of that. If anybody wants to speak to that, but April, you were also about to say something. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? What is literate enough?
To that a little bit. Adam was in our group and he showed us like a visual that I think we looked at either last week or the week before, kind of like the scale of not really understanding a topic at all or being aware of it all the way to the mastery stage. And because we were struggling to really talk about where we felt like functional was or basic, and if basic was the right word or not, we kind of really got tripped up on that. And so having that visual was really helpful, at least for me, to kind of place it somewhere on a scale. But I think the flip side of that conversation was like, what is functional? Who decides what functional is, and who has time to engage in that? If you're doing fine within your world, then why would you be convinced to work on it when you're probably dealing with a lot of other stuff going on in your world. So I don't know, it was a really fascinating conversation. And I guess in my mind, to kind of wrap up our portion is like, we felt pretty good about our conversation, but we definitely have a lot of questions still on the table there, and don't know that we've really nailed it down, but it was a really, really fun discussion.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I want to drill down into, I was very surprised to hear Jenny say, oh, we found our definition pretty quickly. And I just want to, you know, look at this together and ask the group, like, what questions do you have? Or do you agree that, you know, this should be a working definition for the Coalition for Literacy? I think all the groups kind of honestly touched on this question of what is literacy in our conversations as well. I know we did. I was in the Literacy Across the Lifespan group. I think this gets to some of the points that we were making as well. But yeah, what do you guys think? Is this right for now?
Looks good, except the word communicate. Because I don't think literacy is just like communicating per se. I think it's engaging with the world in which you exist, accessing resources in the world in which you exist, right? And so I think we probably could drill down a little bit more. That'd be the only critique I have currently.
I like that, Katina. I feel like we did discuss that a lot in our conversation about how you are interacting with the world and hopefully navigating it, right? And I think some of the words that you're kind of opening up that definition, it's not just communicating, but being able to engage. I think that's a really thoughtful critique that we talked about, but didn't necessarily put into the definition.
Yeah, I agree with Katina. A lot of our conversation it actually dealt with what is literacy, because you can't talk about it across a lifespan unless you understand how you're defining it, I guess. And I like who just chatted that. So that a person can thrive, like, to what end? Yeah, that's the thing that I feel like is maybe missing. I think this is a completely fine definition of strictly like what is literate, you know, like to be literate. Yes, you want to be able to communicate, you have to be able to read, write, listen, and talk. To whatever degree you can do those things. But to what end? I think for this group, this work, having a so what in the definition might be useful as well. And I think that communicate comes across as one way, like I'm going to tell you what I need, but I think that it's more of two-sided than that as far as literacy is concerned. You know, we want people, like Katina was saying, to be able to access, to be able to find and process information. So it's also not just externally communicating what I'm thinking, but also internally being able to process the information that I'm finding.
Okay. All right, in the interest of time, oh yeah, Erin, go ahead. We'll do a quick comment and then we'll move on to the next group.
And we talked about this a little bit in our group discussion, but like for me, my only hiccup is thinking of people who don't speak English, you know, like maybe it's like accessing resources to be able to communicate, because like we talked about the deaf community as well as like people who are literate in Spanish or Arabic or something like that. Like they are literate, but like that doesn't mean they can communicate in the world that they live in right now if they're like a refugee or something like that. So that would be my only want to adjust the definition at some point, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think that actually then flows really nicely into literacy across the lifespan. Would someone from that group like to share the definition?
we sort of ended right as I was saying. I'm not sure if we actually came to a consensus on what our definition was going to be, but I think we almost got there. So I will give it a shot, and then Katina and Linda can chime in. And I just dropped all of my notes into that document so that you all can see the entire conversation if you'd like. But it goes back to what I was just saying. It's being able to find and process the information you need to achieve whatever it is you're trying to do. And that then encompasses all the different types of non-traditional literacy that I think Lauren was talking about earlier, which goes to civic, social, technological, health literacy, being able to advocate for yourself at a doctor's office, that kind of thing. So I would say, it's like the tools that they need for what they're trying to do at any given time. But then our conversation also went into that, literacy across the lifespan requires, and this addresses also what, who was just saying about the ESL stuff, non-native English speakers. Aaron was saying about this, is that I feel like literacy, or being literate in a literate world, is a two-way street, in that we want people to intrinsically be motivated to become more literate. We want the community to offer a legible world for people to be able to navigate, which means easily find the resources they need, be able to access resources, or find, whatever it is they're trying to do. So that's sort of what we talked about. And then Katina talked a lot about how, this isn't just one group's job. This isn't just one, it's not just the education sector that needs to solve this problem. This is something that we are all accountable for, and we need to invite all folks into the conversation and into the work, and value what they bring to the table.
That's great. Good summary. Were there any questions for the group that came out of the conversation? Or areas where you feel like we need more information? No? Okay, well, I'd love to hear from the group on this definition. So I think there was a lot in that, and we can kind of expand it out as we'd like to, but the working definition I have written down is being able to find or process the information you need to achieve whatever it is you're trying to do at any given time. Does that kind of get to the essence of what we mean by literacy across the lifespan? Okay.
I think one of the things that I pointed out in our conversation is not just access what you need to do what you want to do, but it's like to actively participate in your life. Like wherever you are, be it a toddler, elementary, middle school, high school, adult, whatever, it's to be actively engaged in your life, so people aren't doing for you and to you, but you have a decision in that process. So I know that's probably something we have to kind of workshop and really kind of finesse the wording to get there, but I think that's extremely, extremely important, because when we're not literate, what we see for children, what we see for adults, is that people, they aren't really engaging in their own life in a robust way, because they have to settle for people doing for them or to them, because they don't have the tools to access what it is they need to be fully engaged in their own life. So I would love for us to massage that out and finesse the wording to get there.
I love that. Yeah, for me, it comes down to like agency is kind of what my brain goes to, like really giving that agency to people. And sometimes that involves actually opening, I mean, we talked about in our group, opening the worldview a little bit to see what else is there, not just taking what is, immediately visible in their world. Okay, great. Let's hear from group number 3. What does it mean for KC to be a city of readers?
I did the notes so I can kind of summarize, and then Kate or Lauren, if you want to add to it. I don't think we really came to a definition per se. We came up with a lot of questions. We talked a lot about how it's like there's a lot of systems level stuff that we need to address to be able to be a whole city of readers. We talked a lot about needing to define the first two questions, like what is literacy and what is across the lifespan, as well as defining like when we say like a city of readers, do we mean the city proper? Do we mean the whole metro? Kind of defining that more specifically, and in defining that, making sure that all stakeholders have a seat at the table here so that we can like know what the buy-in is. We also talked about the measurables, looking beyond testing, particularly with like older, you know, like if we look more at adult literacy, like typical tests don't work, but also testing we know doesn't always work for showing what kids truly are capable of. So what are other ways that we can measure? And we started brainstorming a little bit of that, but really got down to like, we have to look outside of the box and look at like, not just, Lauren brought up a great point about like a student could decode a word like suitcase and figure out what it means, even if they don't know it. But if they've never used a suitcase or don't have any other context clues or understanding of it, that does that really mean that they're literate, like that they know it? So yeah, it's kind of quick and dirty what we talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, please.
And that we also, you know, talked about how those are all things that would be necessary for like our whole, like we'd have to establish a set geographic area and figure out who the players are and get everybody involved to have like community buy-in with that identity as a city of readers, for all of, you know, the institutions involved to be able to say that that's a priority for them, and that that's something that they can identify with.
Yeah, and my observation was just that I think we came up with more questions than answers. I mean, it was sort of questions about what's the geographic area, you know, we're talking about getting mayors, city councils on board and kind of leadership. So I think lots of room to decipher what the coalition wants to focus on.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear reflections on these questions. I'd love to try to like hear the beginning of an answer to some of these questions. Like someone proposed the geographic, you know, scope should be all of America, or, you know, just my house, you know, like I'd love to just throw something out there and then we'll have spaghetti on the wall and we can play with it. But I think this is a really great list of questions, and I think it kind of refines our focus of like what we need to answer to move forward. But let's, in the spirit of a working definition, I know we just have a couple minutes, so like 1 or 2 thoughts on like what could we throw out there that we could start to build consensus around.
We kind of focused in on the 5-county by state metro area. So we did kind of go ahead and say that by city we mean Clay, Platte, and Jackson counties on the Missouri side, and Wyandotte and Johnson counties on the Kansas side. And that's kind of the city would encompass those areas, and of readers would mean, you know, of people who identify with, you know, as, you know, reading as a part of their identity, reading and literacy as something that is a key element of their life.
That's the part that gets this catchphrase. I don't want to say I have an issue with it, but I feel like it's a very romantic phrase.
Yes.
And it doesn't match the like it's like we're talking about like survival, you know. So I feel like City of Readers romanticizes what we're trying to do, and reading is one thing. Like it's lovely to think that everybody could kick back with, you know, a Bronte novel or something, but that's not what we're talking about. You know, we're talking about like functional day-to-day, being able to live and survive and thrive.
And exactly, Jillian, there are a lot of people out there that are literate, but do not identify as readers.
Right.
Because it's not something that they think of reading as a hobby, and they have other hobbies that are important to them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to keep coming back to my marriage. It's kind of strange. I'm bringing it up twice in one day. But my husband, who is a highly successful individual, he's a PhD. He's a VP at a hospital. He is dyslexic, so he hates reading. You know, to this day, he doesn't like it, and he does it. And he's very good at it now. But it took a really long time, and he would not call himself a reader. But it does not, by any means, mean he's not a literate, functional human being, you know? So I don't know. I just have this disconnect between the catchphrase and the work that we're trying to do.
Yeah, and does everyone need to be able to like sit down with a copy of the Iliad and enjoy it to and understand it to be considered a reader?
Yeah.
I wonder too if it could potentially dilute our impact. If we're saying, you know, our goal is to creating a city of readers, we have a lot of people that buy into the idea that already are readers or see themselves as readers, that's already part of something they identify with. And so maybe it shifts our focus a little bit. Maybe we just kind of focus on the first two, you know, and thinking about when we're talking about a literate city, what do we really mean? You know, it's probably not people reading for pleasure. I don't know, but maybe that's something we talk about. I think we probably all self-identify as readers. And it's definitely, I would guess, part of most of our identities, but maybe that's something for us to explore is, you know, is the purpose of our coalition to look more at the barriers to literacy in our city and how to overcome those barriers. Is that the more urgent question?
I think the idea of agency is really important. Like, you know, these three questions work together, but if people aren't able to use literacy to make changes, then the people who are in power are going to always be in power, and you can't change any of those systems without agency for the people who might not have it. And so I think, like, when I think of a city of readers, I think, who are the people, you know, how are people able to create agency for themselves? How are they able to move themselves around in systems and not continue to be held in a place of without power?
Well, I love this conversation because I think City of Readers was something we got from you as a coalition before we started.
You did not get from us as a collective. I'm just going to be honest.
She's right.
I did not ever sign on to that. I know who posited it and moved it forward, and we did not give pushback, which is our own fault, right? So I think that may need to be, yes, in that way, yes, it came to you. So I think that's something that we have to work on. I think, because I think the difference is, like, when you think of City of Readers, like, what is a reader? Is it someone that loves literature and so they're going to sit back and put their heels up and read literature? Or is a reader someone that just has the tools, the skills to access whatever text they are engaging with at the time? So maybe some work around, like, what is that? Or to Linda's point, are we saying let's have Kansas City be a literate city? And in that way, we're really clear in terms of, hey, we are tooling folks with the skills they need. And if they become lovers of literature, that's their own decision. If they identify as a reader, that's their own decision, right? So what is the real work that we're attempting to do at every level? And so that is, I think, the deeper conversation it probably needs to be had, and we have to push ourselves around.
All right. I love this conversation, guys. This is why language matters. This is why we need a shared thought bubble around words like readers, and what does it mean to be a city of readers. And I also just want to call out, like, you guys feel comfortable enough to talk about the contrast that you felt with that word. And I feel like we were able to have a constructive conversation around it. So that's also just, shows that we're actually coming together as a coalition. We're able to get to those conversations. So woohoo. All right, we just have a couple minutes to wrap up. For homework, well, essentially it's a little bit of an open question. We'd like to continue to work on these definitions with you. And so we wanted to pause it as a way forward for you to essentially form a little committee with the group that you were in. And over the course of this week, commit to either meeting or at least over email, continuing to refine that working definition and those questions, those sub questions that you think are really important for us to focus on as a coalition. So again, you would be meeting or at least, communicating over email to make progress on those definitions. Does that make sense? Does that sound like a good way to move forward?
On all three of the definitions?
No, just the one that you were assigned to.
Just the one, okay.
Mm-hmm. And then the other piece of homework is a survey, like I mentioned, where you'll be self-selecting for your organization where on the lifespan you feel that you work, and then providing a little bit of information that will be included and sort of a coalition-wide digest of like what we all do and where. So those will be the two pieces of homework for next week. And I'll send that over Basecamp to everybody. Yeah, and then real quick, plus deltas, either type it in the chat or we have a couple minutes for people to raise their hand. Pluses, things you liked from the meeting, ways, kind of observations of growth, for example, or deltas, things that we can also, grow in and maybe reprioritize for next time. We definitely welcome any feedback.
I think you said this, April, but I appreciate just being able to challenge the conversation. I don't think we're able to get anywhere without having difficult conversations. So I just appreciate when people are feeling brave enough to do that.
I love that. Thank you. Any other pluses or deltas? All right. Well, you can always reach us via email or Basecamp. Yeah, was there someone who's going to speak?
If there's anything like, what is literacy that's more thought-provoking and we could, have like a little bit early so I can kind of think about, digest and come up with that's helpful for me.
Okay. Yeah, to have a heads up on sort of the topic of the conversations. Sure. Yeah, we can work on that. Okay, well, thank you. I know we're at time. I want to respect it. Enjoy your week and we'll be in touch. Thank you guys so much for taking the time.
Thank you.